Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. Today is Stephen Friday once again. It's October 11th, 2024. And, folks, welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking and hearing from our buddy Steve Staggs about kingdom economics. It's really the transfer, but I've used that multiple times in the title. And this is exciting because it's worth seeing again and reviewing because it's so significant, especially if you're somebody that's in crypto. This channel is really interesting because on one hand we talk about current events in crypto, and we talk about the current economic system and the alternative financial system that could be realized with decentralized finance. But then we've got this thing on Friday, which is all about you know God's plan in the world and how it relates to economics, which is what today's topic is. So it's very exciting to me because um, I have a friend who talks about redemptive economics, and a separate friend, Steve, who shares the transfer, which is has an economic component to it. And I think the base thing that I want to get across to you today is the fact that, folks, all the silver and gold is mine, says the Lord. That's from Haggai 2. And when you start thinking about resources and you really back out from it, you understand that the lifeblood of the economic system is money, resource, right? But if you really boil it down, all it is a proxy for human labor. So it's a system in which the lifeblood of money flows. You think about your own system, your own body, right? Lifeblood, it's in the life is in the blood, right? If you have a clot in your heart, guess what happens? Life doesn't go on very long, right? So it is meant to flow. So if the economic, energy is meant to flow, well, what's happened to it and how has it gotten messed up? And so we're going to be examining that today with our buddy Steve. I'll come back afterwards after we listen to this clip, which is just absolutely fantastic. So buckle up, get your notes out. I certainly will. Let's say hello to our buddies in the chat. Mike Ostel, good morning, Matt, Steve, and Jesus. So happy to be here. Thanks for being here. It is so good to see you in this at this time. And I know there's so many people that are challenged and struggling, and it's nice to have this teaching from Steve to remind ourselves of what are we doing here? Why are we here? What does this all mean? Mr. Rock Jockey, what's going on? Carter Hill, hey Mike, you've been on my mind. What's going on, Carter? Thanks for being here. Halo, KDM, all the usual suspects are in the house. Let's get into the content. I hope if you're new to this, you're going to see something really unique and interesting hearing from Steve Sachs related to the economic system, but also how it fits into literally a spiritual one. And that's really cool when you see these things kind of integrate, because most people I think are very compartmentalized. They're like, oh, yeah, money and economics, that's not a spiritual thing. No, 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 no. These are all part and parcel of the same thing. And when you see it all fit together, you realize, money is just a tool. So let's hear from our buddy Steve, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Well, there's a piece of it. What is the transfer, Steve? And what is this slide here? Because it is got a lot packed in it.
Yeah, yeah. This is in this slide. We could probably spend a month of streams.
Yeah.
Just unpacking what this slide is representing.
Agreed.
I mean, it really is true that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and this slide is worth about 100,000 words.
Yep.
Because in each part of it, it portrays a different picture. So I'll just start by saying, in the hour that we have, we'll kind of keep this at a very, very high level. And then if you want in future streams to go through it in more detail, we certainly can. Um, the basic concept here is that there is an economic model represented by both sides of this slide. If you see the blue box in the middle where it says wealth repositories, person, business, institutions, if you kind of draw an imaginary line, vertical line on that, and everything on the left side of the slide is what's currently operating, and what's on the right side of the slide is what is beginning to operate. And when we talk about the transfer from the standpoint from a wealth perspective, there is a transfer occurring from the wealth that is represented on the left side of the slide to the right side of the slide. Okay. Now, the effect of that is that as that occurs, that's what the dollar signs are representing. As that occurs, then there is a depletion of wealth on the left side and an increase of wealth on the right side. The left side of the system is the left side of the slide is referred to as the wealth extraction system, which basically says this is what the intention of that side of the slide is. And this is the perverse application, excuse me, that's the wrong word, the perverse administration of the wealth system that God created. So this is really a spiritual, a high level spiritual view of what is occurring that will then take shape in the, in the material world that we live in. And so what is this really all about? On the left side of the slide, you mentioned that the system is broken. What I'd like to offer is a slightly different perspective. The system is not broken. The character animating it is rotting. And so what it's doing is it's destroying the intended capability of the system. Now we're back to what you've described before, the gun on the table. See, the systems are neutral. Now, they may, a system that is built to harm, when the right person animates that system can be modified to bless. See, so systems are all neutral. If you take a system that is intended to harm, if you put the right person in there, they just render the system inoperable. They just don't use it. See, so it becomes worthless. So the thing to recognize is that we have creative abilities because we are made in the image and likeness of God. We possess His physical attributes. We also possess the elements of His nature and character that He develops over time. And so He teaches us how to build systems. Satan hasn't built a one of these, by the way. He does not have creative abilities. That is reserved for the Elohim man, as we've talked about, who is operating with his God, who has creative abilities. Creativity is one of the fundamental elements of choice. And so the creative mind says, here's what exists. How do I make that better? Oh, that's the exercise of choice. It's the evaluation of circumstances. It's the determination of value. And then there is a modification that occurs as a result of creative abilities. We call it innovation. Same concept. So Satan hasn't created a thing. He just hijacks what has been created. So he has taken the wealth production system that God has built, entrusted that to man, and then he has perverted it. And how has he perverted it? He has turned it, if you look on the right side, he's converted it from a wealth production system to a wealth extraction system. Now, the issue with that is that when you extract wealth, eventually you extract too much of it. And when you extract too much of it, what happens is you have none left over to reproduce it. So there is a failure element built into it because it's perverse. So what does this wealth extraction system do? It exploits, it controls, it distracts, it punishes, it steals from the enslaved who are the wealth producers. If we pause for just a moment and say, who is it that produces wealth and how is wealth produced? In both questions, there is something at the center of that, and that center is mankind.
Yep.
Okay? Wealth cannot be produced apart from man.
Yep.
That's as simple as it is. So man is the wealth producer. And how does he produce wealth? He takes the resources that he did not create and then utilizes those resources to produce value in excess of what they possess on their own. Okay? So a grain of wheat that's growing wild out in the field that the man sees some deer eating on. He's hungry. He goes out there. He chews on himself. Says, "Wow, I can eat this too." What does he do? He then takes his innovative capabilities. He clears out the land and he just takes that seed and he builds it to where there's an entire field out there that now supplies food for both him and everybody that he knows. The deer doesn't know how to do that.
Yep.
The deer doesn't have the capability, the innovative capability to do that. Only man possesses that capability. So what Satan does on his side is he wants to control that capability. And when he controls that capability, he will allow the wealth producer to receive what you and I've called the cost of wealth. He will not allow him to receive a portion of the wealth that he produces. And right there is the mechanism of enslavement. Okay. So that's on that left side. What that left side has to do is that left side has to, in order to keep the wealth producer continuing to labor and labor and labor, so it produces the margin that we call wealth above his, his labor, he has to create a scarcity delusion. He has to create the impression that scarcity exists when in reality there's an abundance that exists. All of creation tells us of the abundance that is here. You look in the ocean at the fish, you look at the fields with the crops, you look at the buffalo that were in herds of millions, in the plains. It does not matter where you look. The stars that are in the sky, the entirety of the creation is screaming at us its abundance. And yet we are told that we live in scarcity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I
Now,
interject here for just one second? I just want to review this because this is huge. For anyone who's watching this now live or later, there is so much packed here that it's just mind numbing. But if you're somebody that's in crypto, like I am and you are, this is so fundamental to your understanding because people kick around these words all the time and you're going to hear the base layer here. And I just want to reiterate what you said because it's so powerful. At the top of this slide, it says the transfer money, wealth, and wealth producers. Right underneath it, it says all wealth is a product of human labor. So this one massive point is everything that is related to wealth is based on the creativity of God's man, and that's you and me.
Yep.
What's interesting here is that red arrow that says mammon, right? And in parentheses, it says Satan. It says current world order, money is God. Will you explain those three statements there and how that is characteristic of this left-hand side?
Yes. Once you get the general concept of what this left side of the slide is intending to do, what it's designed to accomplish, and how it functions. Once you at that fundamental level, now you can go in and you can step back and start asking the questions: why? Why does it function like this, and who caused it to function in that manner? Okay, so why does it function in this way? So as to extract resource. Well, why is there a need to extract resource? To finance intention.
Yeah.
What do you want to do when you finance intention? Accomplish an outcome.
You know
Okay.
what's so awesome about that? It's so funny you say that because in crypto, everyone says when Lambo. It's a joke, right? It's a meme. But this is really great. I just want to say it because it hit me really well. It's like, what am I planning in my mind to do with the excess?
Yeah.
That's like what's driving most people in crypto. They're
Yeah.
basically going, when this next bull run comes, this time I'm not going to be, I'm going to be able to have some liquid so that I can make sure I sell at the top, right?
Mhm.
And I'm going to maximize the extraction that I get that's disproportionate to me because I'm smart and I made good decisions and I have my fluffy slippers on. And I'm going to plan what I'm going to do or what I think that excess money is going to do for me and the things I care about when Lambo.
Yes.
I love
And
that.
by
That
the
intention, it fuels intention. I love that.
And guess what? You don't use your base investment to do that.
Right.
You use the margin to do that.
That's right. That's right.
See? Well, guess what? That's because you're the one who gets the margin. But what would happen if somebody else heisted that margin?
Yeah.
See? Well, guess what? They would use it for their purposes.
Yeah.
To do exactly what they want, to produce it and finance the outcomes that they're looking for. Okay, so who is that? Who is it that's doing the extracting? Okay, well, now we're back to this. Okay, all wealth is a product of human labor. Yep. The human exerts their labor. That labor produces an abundance beyond what they use to produce that wealth. There is a margin that occurs. Well, who gets to use the margin? Well, on the left side of the slide, the one who's extracting that margin is this one in the parentheses called Mammon, Satan in parentheses. Now, for those who have spent time in the New Testament and studying any of the things that Jesus has said, he made this one statement that says you cannot serve God and mammon. He begins that statement by saying you cannot serve two masters or two lords. So what he does is he likens mammon to a lord, a master, in the same way that he identifies God as a lord and a master. Now we know God is a lord and a master, but who is this lord and master that he calls mammon? Well, his name in the heavenlies, we call him Satan, but in the heavenlies, Satan is known as Mammon. He is the Lord. He is the Lord of the system that he has hijacked. And what he does is, out of this current world order, this system has designed to produce an order, meaning it is a mechanism that is designed to achieve an outcome. Okay. Anybody who has a family knows that in your family, you have a particular order. The family operates in an orderly manner. Some people may look at that as disorder. Some people may look at that as hyper order. It doesn't matter. It's a form of order. It is the way that your family operates. It is not only the processes, the intentions, the procedures for how it works when the kids go to bed, at school, et cetera, et cetera. You get that part of it. Well, that's the same thing. The current world order, Satan has arranged this and administered this to function in a particular way to achieve an outcome that enables him to extract the wealth in order to use that wealth to produce his intentions, his plan. Okay. So that's what that order does. And he does that by making money God. Now, what do we mean when we say money is God? Well, the fundamental role of God is to, when we think of it, we think of God as the creator, yes, but more so we think of God as the one who has absolute rule and authority. It is the all-powerful. It is the almighty. God is all-powerful, almighty, all-knowing. Okay? And so money is positioned to be God. In other words, money is the thing that enables all things to be done or to keep other things from being done. Now, the way that we've heard it in the past is he who holds the gold makes the rules. Well, what is that saying? I have the gold, i.e. the money, and when I have the money, I get to be God. I get to make all the rules.
Yep.
Well, that's exactly what's happened on the left side of the slide. By making money God, God becomes the thing, the most powerful element within his order. It becomes the thing most sought after. It becomes the thing most prized. It becomes the thing that tells you it is capable of doing whatever you want done. Whatever dream you have, whatever need you must resolve, it will provide that for you. Money is God. And so what happens is the way that looks is, for example, we'll just talk about people even in the church. I believe God has called me to the ministry. Okay, well, what is usually the first question? If you've ever talked with anybody, who has come to you and asked you for advice or counsel about that, the very first question they'll have is, how am I going to make a living?
Yep.
Well, what are they referring to? The money called God. And when Jesus says you can't serve that guy, because the moment you put money in the position of being the first question, you have elevated that thing to the highest point of power in your life.
Wow. Steve, it just dawned on me, and I hadn't ever thought about this the same way. When he sent out the disciples, he told them not to take anything with them.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Yep. And then he asked them at the end, when you were with me, was there anything that you lacked?
Wow.
So there, like I said, we could spend on virtually every line item here. We could spend an entire episode on these things because it is just that rich and deep.
Well, this is the red pill, folks. This is the Matrix red pill. So let me ask you this, because this dawns on me too. So, we hear in historic, terms, the concept of slavery,
Yeah.
right? We look at the Bible and we look at the Israelites being enslaved. And so what we have as our understanding of slavery is that you are held against your will.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, we were in captivity. We were in bondage. And what's really interesting about this is we just talked about infinite resolution. We talked about, how these things repeat themselves, how we see this as the form and function of creation. And let me ask you this. And is this a good connection? In this current world order, or God or money is God, and that we are basically we would commonly say, well, yeah, slavery's bad. Child sex slavery is bad, and slavery in America was bad, and slavery back in the day was bad. But the cleverness of the fact that this system is actually the same thing, that it
Yes.
is literally enslaving us because we're essentially giving our authority over to it. And we're saying, yeah, my God is money.
Yep. That is it. That is
And,
exactly right. And
and you are a captive to it.
test it out. You want to do something? What is the first thing you're going to ask? How am I going to pay my bills?
Yep.
Now, we can get into philosophical arguments about or discussions about that all day long. But look at we're talking in this stream about this base code
Yeah.
element.
Yeah.
What is the base code? On the left side of the slide, the base code is there has been a hijacking of God's financial system, and that hijacking has converted it from a wealth production system to a wealth extraction system that exploits and controls and enslaves. And the way it does that is by making money God.
Is
And if
this
you question that, ask yourself what the first question is you ask if you want to do something that causes you to put your labor in question, or who
Yeah.
who you have given your labor to. If you remove that, what do you then do? Oh my goodness, I've got to I've got to pay the bills. I can't do what you asked me to do, God. How am I going to pay the bills?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, just pause for a second and unpack that very legitimate concern that we don't know how to deal with because it is noise that distracts us from the fundamental question.
It seems like this is another lie. Okay,
Yes.
so we talked about in the beginning, the serpent, Satan gets into the garden through the serpent and lies to Eve. And what I think is so amazing about this is, and help me know if I got this right, that when, what is Mammon doing? What is Satan doing in this scenario? Is once again doing what he does, lies. And in that lie is exploitation, control, distraction, punishing, enslavement. But it's a lie again. It's saying that one, there is no God, but two, your God shall be money. And that's the system. That's how I will enslave you, is I will get you to agree with me that you can't do anything without my controlling God, which is money.
Yes. Um, but if you were to say that overtly, we'd
Right,
all
right.
flip him the bird.
And that's what we're saying. That's
Yeah.
why we're here.
Yeah. That's why we're here saying, okay, what we're doing is we're putting vocabulary to what he's saying.
Yeah.
We're penetrating through the noise and the distraction and the misdirection. See? And so the issue is not that man is not to work. The issue is not that man is not productive. The issue is not that man exercises choice. It's that man, when he exercises choice, that becomes his sovereign decree for himself. So if you think strategically and you're on the left side of the slide and your name is Mammon and what you're trying to do is extract the wealth produced by that man, would you go in and put a gun to his head and say either give me your bank account or you're dead? Well, that could be effective for a single event, but what would you do? You would try to convince him that your system, your order is the appropriate order that blesses and benefits him. Okay. And so he gives himself or herself to the order. Okay. So let's kind of get a look at how this works, the cycle of this, so that we can then go into some of the details of it. What happens is, once again, on the left side of the slide, wealth must be pooled in order to create this illusion, this delusion of scarcity. And so what you begin to see in this is that this wealth, the excess wealth that man is able to produce, that's nearly inexhaustible, it has to go somewhere. Now, in the parable of the man who built the crops and was so prospered that he had to build all of these barns and stuff, that's a picture. It just keeps filling up.
BlackRock.
Well, there would be an example of BlackRock. That's right. See,
There's some barns.
there are some barns out there. There are individuals called Bezos that is a barn, where these exorbitant amounts of wealth are produced and they have to be pooled. So they go into now this blue kind of rectangle in the center called a wealth repository. These could be individuals, these could be businesses, these could be institutions, but the idea is there has to be a place where the excess wealth is transferred to and then pooled in order to create this illusion of scarcity.
Steve, we're telling our men in this culture that if you don't produce and pool, and we're going to give you a card, a report card. It's going to be you're going to be judged. Who you are is based on this number in this bank account in this barn, and that the culture has told men especially that you're not anyone of value unless you can pool this money.
Yep.
We're swimming in the depths of that in crypto. That,
Yep.
who you are is your bank account, and this is the scorecard. And if you got a big scorecard, you're a winner. And what you're saying here, this lie that's been told, I mean, it's pervasive through this system, is
Yes.
that who you are is what you can produce, and who you are is what you can pool. And the people that we admire in our culture, and it's exactly this lie, is the Bezos, right? It's the Musk. It's the people who have pooled as much as possible. And the world, in the culture, rewards those and says, you are a winner.
Yes. Yes. And guess what this money god does? It gives you power.
Yeah.
See, if you will play by my rules and make me your God, I will give you power.
Isn't that what Satan said to Jesus coming out of the wilderness? He's like,
Exactly.
turn these stones into bread. I'll give you
Yep.
this whole thing.
Yep. Yep. I'll give it all to you if you just bow down and call me your superior. That's what the definitions of the words say. Bow down before me and declare me as your superior. I will give you all of this. And Jesus says, no, that doesn't how it works. By the way, it's already mine.
So,
You're not giving me anything. It's already mine.
so would a term to add to the left-hand side of this slide be power?
Well, power is part of it.
Yeah.
That's part of the reward. That's what incentivizes those individuals, businesses, and institutions to participate as reservoirs, as repositories of the wealth, because what they gain in response is power. I mean, think about the amount of power that Bezos, any of them, Musk, you just go right down the line.
Yeah.
See, just think of the enormous amount of power that they have. But what do we do all the time? We look at, we call George Soros the big bad wolf, and we say, look at all these things he's doing because he's got this whacked out, way that he wants to control the world, yada, yada, yada. No, he has no political agenda other than to create disruption. Why? Because he's a currency trader. And the world currency is US dollars. So where is the greatest value to be extracted on the left side of the slide, except through the mechanism of volatility? The greater the volatility, the greater the margin, the more wealth I extract.
Well, and what's amazing too is I keep hearing these things, Jesus speaking through the word. You can even take this to favoritism. Jesus talks about, hey, don't just take the person who's dressed really nice and has the ring and does all this stuff and put them in this high place.
Yeah.
And I think what's amazing is how much commentary there is from Jesus around this model.
Yes.
And saying, listen, you're going to, think about this. Elon Musk shows up at your door, Jeff Bezos, we fawn over people, and that's this power that they exert, right? Celebrity, money is people we have in our culture, especially. We admire this power and we give it energy by giving favoritism to those who exert it over us.
Yes. And now we say why? Because they are our gods. We don't think about it in those terms overtly.
Right.
But that is exactly what happens. Oh, if I want something, think about this, for a minute from an investment standpoint. A friend of ours has been going through this for some time, trying to make this break. That what do you do? Oh, I need money in order to be invested in my project so that I can do what God asked me to do. So what do? You go to the people with money and you try to sell them on your idea that, this is a good investment. What are you doing that for? Because you're asking for them to provide you the power that is necessary in order for you to get your project done. And the moment you do that, you are now declaring money as your God, and you're not even thinking in those terms. It's a noise that has become so common to us, we don't even recognize that it's there. And yet
So,
we do it all the time.
okay. So let me use a practical example of this.
That,
So I'm somebody who says, "Hey, Jesus, you're the only one that has authority to speak to me.
yeah,
I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to hear from you, and you're going to have a calling." So one of the callings I talk about a lot is unlocking global generosity by giving. Right? He's
yeah,
given me a lot of pictures of that. He's given me physical items that reinforce that, and all of these things.
yes.
And what I hear you saying directly to me in this is, he either spoke to you or he didn't, Matt. Either he spoke to you something that he wants to partner with you on. Okay, so let's just make that assumption. Yes, and I believe that's true. But let's just say this with anyone. You understand that he calls you out to something. And what you're saying is, in the practical, we often go back to Mammon and Satan and this God money and say, this is the reason I can't do this thing that God's called me to, because I don't have the money.
Yeah.
And this is what this is saying to me is, if in fact Jesus is speaking to you, it's because he is the vine, you're the branches, and he has something for you to do. If you recognize that he owns it all,
Yeah.
that actually provision isn't primary, it's barely secondary. That actually you following him and you moving forward with him in partnership with him, that actually the result of that following is provision.
That is it. We haven't gotten to the right side of the slide.
I know, isn't it crazy?
We're just talking about the left
40
side.
minutes on Satan today.
Well, it's important because this
It
is
is.
where we are. If you're going to get someplace, there's two pieces of information that are absolutely vital. One is where you're going, but the other is where you are. And so this is where we are in this slide. And so you're exactly right, Matt, when you're hearing that, is that if Jesus is saying, I need you to do something, I need you to partner with me, Matt, to unlock global generosity through the mechanism of giving, you have a choice. You can take off on that on your own and try to make it in your own deal, or you can say, okay, Jesus, how do you want to do that?
Yeah.
That question will determine which side of the slide that you're going to operate on. If you take it and move it on your own, which by example, well, Jesus, how am I going to pay the bills? Okay, I'll tell you what, you provide me the money first and then I'll do it. Well, isn't that my story with the house a few episodes ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus, what do you want me to do? I want you to go. If I told you, you wouldn't believe me. Okay, I get it. I'll take you at your word. I'm not going to believe you, but I don't have a choice. What do you want me to do? I got 20 bucks left. I got two little kids and a wife out there who is wondering what the heck wacko dad is up to this time, right? What do you want to do? Tell me. I want you to go buy a house. Right on. Apparently you haven't checked my bank account lately. I got 20 bucks. What was the first thing that I said to him? Well, hey, if you want to provide me with $25,000, I'm happy to do that. What have I done at that moment?
Yeah. You've inserted
different
God.
I have inserted the superiority of money over the command of the one who owns it all. Now, why did I do that? Because I didn't understand how this thing works.
What an invitation it is, and you see so many examples of this too, where, what we think is the structure is, it's so disruptive. Jesus calling you out of the boat, or like, this idea that, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this, and him literally saying, don't take anything with you. And, we think about, there's so many stories. We've heard this so many times, right? Somebody gets fired from a job and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so many times people look back in retrospect at these things and they're like, you know what? I burned the boats, man. I just went for it. And it is amazing how these things came. And it was the defining difference is that, I guess I would use the term faith, but it's also, we talk about the packet of faith that is given to you. What an amazing thing what are we saying? All right, God wants to partner with you. He's alive and he speaks. Ask him. He wants to partner with you. Okay. Hey, I want you to unlock global generosity. Okay. That's the decree from the guy who owns it all. Let's move forward. And to think that what seems so practical in life, and a lot of very practical people would say, well, how are you going to finance that, Mr. Dreamer?
Yeah.
And it's so counterintuitive because the system itself has been set up to make money our God. It's amazing.
To distract us
Yes.
so that we will continue to labor and produce wealth that can be extracted. Okay. Now the fallacy in the whole thing is the amount of wealth that is produced on the left side of the screen is a fraction of what is produced on the right side of the screen. But we haven't. But we'll get there eventually. Let's finish this concept again. Okay. Is okay. Give me $25,000, God, and I'm more than happy to go out. So what have I done? I have made my partnering with Him conditioned upon Him subjecting Himself to my requirement, which is to make God, my money, my God.
Wow.
And the moment I do that, then everything that is produced out of that stays and cycles through the left side of the screen. You see the subtlety that's in there? And Satan didn't put a gun to my head. He just taught me how his system works, how his order functions, and I just naturally cooperate with it and go with it. And I don't even know I'm doing it. I think I'm being shrewd. I think I'm being responsible. I think I'm being, an upfront guy who's trying to take care of things. Well, what was the reality? Okay, Jesus, I'll do what you asked me to do. What did I do with that next decision? I set aside the God of money. I set the master of mammon aside. What then happened within the next 4 hours? I was the owner of a house with $20 in my pocket.
Yep.
How does that happen?
Yep.
Well, because he owns it all. And he's proactive. He proacts. And when he speaks something, everything has already been put in place to accomplish the very thing he spoke. I send forth my word. It accomplishes the purpose for which I sent it. It will not return to me void or empty. I am God, not
What's
man.
what's funny is in our community, there's people doing TA left and right, looking at charts, trying to predict the future. We talk to people who are whales and all these kind of things. And you've got all kinds of commentary on who's smarter, who's not, what we're watching, watching these cycles and everything. And I think everyone's trying to get an edge, right? And so some of the people that have had some success in crypto, you're like, I was here since 2015 and I've been through these cycles and I know what they look like. Yeah, there's some wisdom in that. You've seen how these cycles work. But it's really so fundamentally a shift in your intention in your mind because it's really difficult to be on the right hand side of this slide unless you're actually listening to him. Because to have something that truly operates on the right hand side, it requires really his power, his calling, his direction, his plan that you come in alignment with. I was thinking about that as a calling. It's not something that it's like, no, this is what I'm doing because he's out front, right? We've got this assumption that he's like, well, I need you. No, this is what I'm doing. And it's amazing to think that when we ask the living Jesus, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do next? I remember, thinking about the idea of holding each thought captive. Well, why would I do that? I do it because I recognize the fact that you own it all and that you're the source of all life and you're the source of all resourcing. And I don't do it so that I get money. I do it because there's so much wrapped up in it. There's so much benefit wrapped up in it, and namely peace and rest and fruit and joy and all of the things that come along with. And it's the thing. It's crazy. We put money in the place, and we essentially go out and try to rent peace, and it never fulfills us. Whatever it may be: drugs, alcohol, money, relationships, Lambos. We take the little hit of it, and that's the thing it gives you is a little hit that satiates you for a little bit of time, but leaves you empty without peace. And it's amazing, like there is this future because it's interesting how we talk about this and it relates to wealth, but in reality, it's actually the right hand side of the slide is wrapped up in so much more than wealth, right? This definition actually of the thing I think people are really longing for, which is actually peace.
Well, the see, once again, we have been taught that God reacts to our situation, and so what He's doing is God is now moving to do something on our behalf because He's going to deal with the perversions that occur.
Yeah.
No, that isn't how He operates. He does not react. That isn't what He does. So let's get to another one of these baseline elements. In the left side of the slide, there is a circulation that has to happen. There is the exertion of the wealth of the labor. There is the production of the wealth from that labor. That labor now has to be put somewhere as it grows and multiplies, and has to go into a wealth repository to be stored and pooled to create this illusion of scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
it then moves out of the wealth repository back into the current world order so that to enable Satan to finance his plan on the planet. And it keeps cycling through that, keeps cycling through that. So what happens? The money, the wealth that's produced, Mammon pushes that wealth to the wealth repository. When he needs to, he'll call upon it. It will then come back up into the current world order and then recycle through that. It'll keep cycling, keep cycling, and keep cycling. Well, the question is, how does that happen? What is the one thing that must occur in order for that left side of the slide to work?
Man's authority.
One thing. Well, that's what's necessary. So what must man do in order for his authority to become accessible and under the control of the current world order? What must man do? Well, here it is. He must act and decide apart from Jesus.
Wow.
That's what he has to do. He has to act and decide apart from Jesus. That's the one thing that has to happen. You remove that element, and this left side of the slide can't work. Okay, so what is it that makes the right side of the slide work by contrast? Everything you do is in partnership with and in response to what Jesus says to do. You do not do one thing apart from him. Oh, wow. Is that what you meant, Jesus, when you said you do not do one thing apart from the Father? That's right. See? Why? Because that's what makes the kingdom work. That's how it works. You operating apart from me is what makes the left side of the slide work. You operating with me is what makes the right side of the slide work. See? Isn't that exactly what I had your brother Paul say to you? Anything that is not of faith is sin, is apart from me. What is sin, Steve? It's anything that's apart from you. No matter what it looks like, how good it looks like, or how bad it looks. Anything done apart from me is sin. Well, where does faith come from? Oh, through what you speak, Jesus. Yes. How is man supposed to live? By every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. That's how man is to live. That's how the right side of my slide works. So the left side of the slide works with you acting independent of me. That's what activates it. Okay? So you want to stop with all the nonsense that's going on the left side of the slide? Quit making decisions all by yourself. Learn to listen to me and partner with me. And guess what? I'll take you from the Hugo that you're operating on the left side to the Lambo on the right side that you've always dreamed about having.
Wow. Folks, if you want to continue that, you can go into the description and you can watch that whole episode. That's the second half of that episode number 22. I'm going to take this even further. For those of you who don't know, Steve Staggs is a guy who I met because Carter Hill brought him to a Texan cryptocurrency meetup in Dallas. And I met this guy, Steve. I shook his hand, and the Lord said to me, listen to this guy. And I jokingly said back to the Lord in my mind, I said, is he an angel? Which is kind of funny. Well, for the next 2 years or 18 months, Steve and I spent a tremendous amount of time on the telephone talking, just he and I. And I mean hours upon hours. And he was so patient and willing to kind of share. But every time, he never corrected me. You know what he said to me? He said, hey, Matt, are you open to a different way of seeing things? And what the amazing thing is, now that I look back at the fact that after episode 37, Steve passed away suddenly. And we're on episode 72. And here I have literally every single day am reminded the great gift that Steve gave me. One of those gifts is I understood and understand the true gospel, right? And that true gospel is Jesus stands alone. But when you see the implications, when you understand the scriptures and you see these things all come together, it is one of the most beautiful things. But it's beautiful in its simplicity. And, obviously on this channel, we talk about crypto and money and all these kind of things. This is probably one of the most powerful things as it relates to understanding God's system, because you noticed at the top of that slide, it showed you this picture of, or this word at the top. It said the transfer. And I always wondered what that was because when I first met Steve, I was like, is this the transfer of wealth so many have talked about from the baby boomers to the. No. What Steve has said, and I'll reiterate here, is when the transfer is of us, the individual, the man or the woman. Okay. In this case, I'll say man because I'm a man. When you transfer the man, you transfer all that the man has. And so if you think about that, well, how does this work? What is the kingdom of God? He made it clear that that left-hand side of the slide is literally us giving up our authority. It's going our own way. I've got it from here. And so much of the scriptures talks about this. What is the ramifications of going our own way? We know that with the prodigal son. He went his own way. What did it lead to? But understanding that as we come back to the Father and understand his nature and character, you realize, okay, why did he create? He created that so that his man would rule and reign this creation that he has made in the fullness of his nature and character with him. So that right-hand side of the slide he's talking about is this idea that, hold on, in the context of money, actually the motivating force of this is there is one who has created it all. His name's Jesus, right? It says all things were created for him and by him. And he's a speaking Jesus. So what is this lie? This lie that I've been told, and the church has propagated it in many cases, is that he is dead. Now, if you address this with them, they say, no, he's not dead, he's alive. Is he really? Do you believe that he's alive? Well, on Easter Sunday, he's alive. He's risen. But we talk about him as the historic Jesus. And then we say, read your Bible. No. The big implications and the greatest gift that Steve ever gave to me was to understand that Jesus is alive and he speaks. And who knows better, you or the one who created it all, who has all authority, the firstborn, right? The Yahweh of the Elohim. Who has this authority? Who has this information and knowledge? Who is strategic? Who is like a shepherd? And we recognize his voice. Who is the one that's out front? And what I don't think you may realize, I've certainly come to this realization regularly, is that I think we think of this God man as like, hey, he's a guy in sandals and maybe he's got a beard and long hair. No, this is the creator of all things. Whatever you can think of as the most complicated, part of the quantum is Jesus. Meaning all of the stuff that you're trying to analyze and figure out, he already knows. And what's interesting about this is this idea of sin. We in this culture think of sin as like these activities that only bad people do. But what did Jesus come and say? People are like, well, what happens if your wife, you commit adultery or whatever, you give her a writ, right, of divorce, right? You write this paper up and give it to her. He goes, no, even if you look at a woman. So all of these things is said in the law. Here Jesus comes and he's like, nope. Even if you even think about a woman, like he's raising this, he's helping you understand this nature of what does it mean to really truly go our own way. And that is actually the definition of sin. And so what is it that we desire? We desire these things that we know are true to be true. Like, hey, you were created uniquely for a purpose. Well, I think that that's the thing. I've got kids and I think of young people, right? Going to college. My daughter just went to college. She's in her first semester. And, a lot of kids in high school and in college are like, well, what am I going to do with my life? Right. And, you meet a young kid and you're like, hey, what are your plans for college, son? And he's like, well. And of course, you try to guide and help. And in the context of this, you say, no, you are actually created in this system and framework for a purpose. And guess what? The guy who knows that purpose, you can talk to him. What? Yeah, you can talk to him and ask him. Well, is he just going to say, I want you to unlock global generosity by giving? Or whatever it may be that he speaks to you. Well, no, he speaks in all situations to all things because we can ask him, hey, how do you see this? In the case, the proof of this is Jesus himself is praying to the Father, right? He goes a stone's throw away in the Garden of Gethsemane, away from the guy, says, hey, don't fall asleep. He goes and he prays to his Father, right? We have this recounted. And the word of prayer is that he's conferring with the Father. He's talking with the Father, right? The Father's alive. He's alive. He's like, hey, if there's any other way we can do this, remove this cup from me. And what I love about that is here's Jesus, the God-man, saying, hey, is there another way we can do this? I know the implications of drinking from this cup. And of course, you think about that, like, really? Can you ask that kind of stuff? Like, hey, maybe there's another way instead of going to the cross. Okay. And what does he say? The Jesus himself was changed, meaning how are the scriptures going to be fulfilled? Remember what we planned since the beginning? Ah, okay. Well, what was given to Jesus at that time? The Father's perspective, and he was changed. The same thing happens for us. As we go to Jesus and we say, hey, I've been going my own way. What do I do? Why did you make me? What's the whole purpose of this, man? Every time I go my own way, I run into what? Death. I run into these brick walls. And one of the amazing things is the transfer of the man is to say, hey, follow me. And it's so fascinating and so simple that actually that's what he said to the disciples. Hey, follow me. Remember the rich young ruler, right? Rich young ruler. He's mega wealthy. We lift him up in the system. We say, you're the best. Why would he come to Jesus and say, hey, what do I need to do to be saved? And what I think is really interesting about that is like, why do you even ask that question, dude? What do you mean? It's like, have you followed all the rules of the law and the prophets? Yeah, I've done all that stuff. Then why are you asking? Because you know that that's not what saves you. So you come to Jesus and you ask him this question, and you're a rich guy. And what does he say to you? He says, go sell everything you have and follow me. And what happened? The rich guy was like, I can't do that, man. I've accumulated all this stuff. And this is the transfer of the man. And why do so many people come to Jesus when they have nothing? Because they've tried it all themselves. Prodigal son, tell the story every time. He wants his inheritance now. He wants the money. He wants the resources. I want to control my own destiny. Dad, give it to me now. Okay. And in the wisdom of the father, he lets him do it. And in reality, you're seeing that he's financing his son's debauchery. And so he knows what the son's going to do. He goes and takes the money. He goes his own way. He makes his own decisions about that money, and he squanders it in wild living. Love it. And what does he find himself? He runs out of money. And so he takes a job feeding pigs in the field. And he sees the seed pods that they're eating, right? The slop of the pigs. And he thinks about his father's house. And he goes, even my father's slaves, his servants, eat better than this. He says, I wonder if I went back, right? This is us, by the way. This is the story of us. We've gone our own way. We're like, yeah, I look afar off and I go, my father's house, the slaves eat better than this. What if I went back? Would he let me be one of his slaves? Because I've sinned against you, Father, and I've sinned against God. He's asking, like, I should be like, I'm asking for the provision of just being your slave. And what happens? And this is the whole story of the whole thing. This is the transfer of the man. He goes back and the father runs out to meet him. And he's really happy to see him. And he wraps his arms around him, kisses his neck, puts a robe on him and a ring. And he says, my son, he was dead and now he is alive. It's really interesting. He didn't call him a slave. There's my slave, my bastard son, or whatever. This jerk, he screwed everything up. Put him in the flog him. No, killed the fattened calf. What did he understand? He understand the nature and character of his father. And I think what's really interesting is he got that ring, that signet ring, which is the signature of God, right? The signature of the family. That's the impression of the family. It's like, hold on. So you knew in advance that I needed to go through this thing. And I would suggest to you that this is life. You want to know the meaning of life and what's going on? Is that you're in this system understanding. And are you going to come to understand the nature and character of your father and actually the role that you have? This whole podcast is called Right Side Up because the system is upside down. You've forgotten who you are because you're following the things you think and you're participating in this hijacked world, which is run by Mammon, run by Mammon, run by Satan himself. In this system, you've been fooled to thinking, oh, well, we're lower than the angels. We don't have any power. I don't have anything. So I have to compete in this system, which is actually just taking and extracting from others. And so as you participate in this world, you go, well, I know how to do this. I got this from here. Let's just a form and function of the same thing of us going our own way, just like the prodigal son. But when you understand the nature and character of the Father, you go, well, I do nothing apart from the Father. He gave me this ring. I came back to him. He's now alive. That's why it says you're a new creation in Christ. You're a new creation. The old has been cast aside. You are new. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a new creation in Christ? It means one in which you say, my power and my authority and all that I do is yours. And I literally, Jesus, only you have the authority to speak to me. So you want to know what life is? Well, I talk about this peace that transcends all understanding. It comes from actually following him. So this Jesus who is alive and he speaks things to you. What does he speak to you? Does he ridicule you? Does he beat you down? No, he speaks life into you. And what's amazing about that is you think about this system and what's going on. And this hit me square between the eyes because of what I'm dealing with now. It's like, well, how do you finance this project? We've got such big plans. And it's so often that we think that, well, Jesus spoke about this thing. And Steve, this is what hit me square between the eyes. He said, remember that story I told you back before where the Lord told me to go and to buy a house? And what did Steve say to God? He said, I only have $25. How am I going to do that? And then Jesus said to him, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. So what did Steve do? $25 in his pocket for like gas and food for the family. And they drive all the way out to Oklahoma City. And he's like, all right. And it's funny. He tells the story. They were in this hotel room and he was in the bathroom and he comes out and the kids were like, hey, what did Jesus say? He said, we're going to buy a house. And think about that for a second. The faith that Jesus gave him when he spoke to him, that faith, that atomic packet of faith, he literally walked it out and said, all right, Jesus, I'll take you for what do you got? And literally at the end of that story, which you have to hear, they owned a house. They didn't pay any money for it. And you're like, that really defies this thing. No, that's actually what's going on. And what it's saying to me is the same thing. I've got these big plans. I've got all this stuff. Carter and I have actually a lot in common here because he's got all these things that Jesus spoken and put together, all these things. And then what do? I don't know if you do this, Carter, but I do this. It's like, well, how are we going to get the resources to do this? I need to tell all these people about this thing. It's interesting, right? Because it's so counterintuitive. It's like, we need everybody to come and finance our thing. No, move forward with me. Move forward with me. Move forward with me. Because these are complete things that he speaks. He doesn't complete partial things. And it's like, oh, okay, so I have to go to Oklahoma City with $25 in my pocket? Well, yeah, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to walk with you. And part of that actually isn't just about getting a house to move into or getting financing for your deal. It's actually this whole kingdom thing, which is I follow you. That's what I do. I follow you. Where are we going? Where are we going next? Where are we going next? What's amazing is, the things that Jesus speaks, right? And then the way that others interpret what Jesus speaks, right? So oftentimes I'll share that Jesus said to me, you're going to unlock global generosity by giving. And there are people within the church and within this thing that say, oh, that's wrong. Well, then they misunderstand it. And what's really interesting is the dynamics of that for me have been this unlocking of global generosity and this giving function actually comes from the feeding of the 5,000. And if you know the story of the feeding of the 5,000, you'd understand this. There's a boy and there was two disciples. There's Philip, and this is in the book of John 6. And then there's Andrew, and then there's Jesus, right? Like, how are we going to feed all these people, right? 5,000 people. How they get, like, it would be a year's wage just to give them a bite. And at that time in the first century, there's no Applebee's, there's no 7-Eleven, there's no convenience store. And I asked the question, and this is the thing of dialogue with Jesus so much about this story is, why did the boy have 5 loaves and 2 fish? Why did he happen to have that? Because it wasn't Jesus created it and handed it to him. No, he had it. And what's amazing to me about that is, do you eat 5 loaves and 2 fish? Does a boy? Is that his lunch? He had it in a little bag. It had his name on it. No, that's more than you would eat in a setting or a meal. It might have been the family's food. So let me ask you this. Were they the only family out of 5,000 that brought any food? Probably not. But here's a boy who literally said, if I give all of this to Jesus, right? And you think about the faith of a child, right? You just think of this boy who goes, I need to give all of our stuff. And I don't know if there was a discussion with the family and the boy's like, hey, let's give this to Jesus. And like, well, son, there's 5,000 people here or 10,000 people when women and children. He's like, well, that's not going to feed them all. And you think about this, like, can Jesus actually feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish? And it's the act of giving, right? It's a catalyst. So many people misunderstand and they think, oh, you just want to get money to give it and you're the one giving it. No. It's not that. It's not. hey, I'll give if I have a lot. That's actually the left-hand side of the slide, right? People are like, well, let me help me make a bunch of money, then I'll be generous. No, 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 no. The inherent gold that's in the hearts of people, meaning the food that they brought, the things that they have, the transfer of the man is everything that the man has. But the catalyst in this situation was the boy giving these things and saying, I'll give all that I have to Jesus. And what does he do? He breaks that bread and he prays. And he says to the disciples, hand this out. And there were 12 basketfuls left over. There's never enough that you can give, even if you've been given a lot, that takes care of all of these things and makes you the king. You're not the king in giving. It's not a competition for that. But that's how our world's set up. That's called charity. No, the calling is actually of the catalytic event of saying, who's willing to give it all to Jesus? And that's what he asked me to do. Does that solve it? Feed 5,000? No, that's what Jesus does. We give all that we have because we are a new creation in him. And what's amazing to me about this is there's so many people. So I deal with this in my daily life and in fundraising and in philanthropy. There's all these like Christian men who have been successful in business. And what do? Well, I want to have significance in my life. In my early career, I met a man named Bob Buford. I actually worked in his office. And Bob Buford made like $300 million selling his telecommunications company. And he wrote a book called Halftime. It's been translated into like as many languages as there are. It's one of the most popular books called Halftime. And it was speaking to these boomer generation guys that basically sacrificed their families to build all this wealth. And they know Jesus and they're like, hey, what do I do? And they're like, you feel like you have sold your soul for this money. And here you are halfway through your life. And you're like, well, how do I have significance? And this was kind of this beginning of this movement of kind of this impact investing, but it was still a pale solution, right? It was an introduction to this idea of who owns this stuff? Do you own this stuff? Is this yours? No, he says, all the silver and gold is mine. And when you think about kingdom economics and this future, what this really looks like, you have to understand that you don't own anything. You are merely a steward of it. So what does it mean when you have a lot? Well, I'm going to be somebody because I'm going to give. No, that's actually the lie. And that's what a lot of people think. They're like, well, help me make a bunch of money or I'm going to make a bunch of money. Then I'm going to be generous. No. What does Jesus say? He says, follow me. Follow me. So every person on this planet is willing to come to Jesus. He's willing to speak to you. He's interested in your every inquiry. Try him on for size. This is not a belief system. This is not a church you need to join. This is recognizing that all things are created for him and by him, and he's alive and he speaks. Go to him. Ask him, are you interested in knowing what he has to say about you? You've tried it in every other possible scenario. And so most people went there and at the end of themselves literally go, all right, I'll try him on for size. And what does he do? He transforms you. But you have to follow him. You have to listen. And he'll teach you how to hear and to listen. And what's amazing about this is Steve said to me, after 42 years of him doing this himself, he said, Matt, it becomes like breathing. I was like, wow, I haven't experienced what that's like yet. But I'm understanding it. In its simplicity, can you think and act in accordance with the fullness of his nature and character? Yes, you can. And he will help you do it. And what is the result of it? Does it have any benefits, Matt? Does it give you power? No, it gives you peace that transcends all understanding. And it is one of the most beautiful things that you cannot articulate because it transcends all understanding. You don't even have language for it. And that's where worship comes from. You're just like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed because you're doing things. I walked out of here with $25 and now I own a house. How does that work? Is it because he wants me to own a house? But this whole concept of like Jesus doesn't react to things. He's out front. He's strategic. He is literally knows it all. But you're like, no, I got it from here. I'm better than this guy is. In that humility, when we come to him, we say, all right, what you got? How do you see this thing? Well, Jesus did that himself. He literally went to him. He's like, I know I'm going to the cross. We got a problem here. Garden of Gethsemane. I'm sweating blood. Is there any other way that we do this? And what did he do? He talked to the Father. And I'm sure, hey, how should I see this thing? It's kind of tough right now in this meat suit. How am I going to deal with this thing? Hey, and what did he do? He's changed. And he realized, all right. But This is actually how Jesus told the disciples how to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You are the most holy. You are the supreme being. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's the plan. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So heaven is the kingdom, this perfect place. He wants that to come here, right? We are the agents to make that happen. And I think a lot of people think, well, Christianity is just about knowing this Jesus character who gives you a ticket out of the fiery flames of hell. Nope, nope, not at all. It's a partnership in which we rule and reign with him in the fullness of his nature and character. And what does that look like? You follow me. And it becomes easy, like breathing. But if you want to understand how I see it, why don't you ask me? But right now, you're going your own way. And so what we do is we participate in the system of mammon, and we literally go, well, I got it from here, or I know, or there's no way that this is possible, that this thing is going to resolve. Well, you haven't followed me. And also, I just, I'm hit square between the eyes and all this stuff. Is to say, I'm going all these places to try to find money. Oh, I need to go tell these people and talk to these VCs or talk to this and do this, and I need to hustle this thing, and I need to. No. And one of the things Steve said to me, I thought was so fascinating, and it's so true. And you continue to understand the depths and the facets of these things, and you gain wisdom over time because Jesus shows you these things. And then he said this thing that I thought was highly impractical at the time. And he said, as you talk to people about what you're doing, he said, has Jesus told you to invest in this? Because if he hasn't, this isn't right. And it's really interesting. If you've read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is in the 1930s. And it's a really interesting book because it's kind of like the one of the first self-help books. And it tells a story about this pastor who needed like $1 million. And of course, this isn't like the 1930s. $1 million was a different thing. And he literally preaches a sermon. He moves forward. He's like, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to, he had this vision for this thing, this amazing act of service that he felt compelled and I would say called to do. And rather than go share it with rich guys and try to convince them to give him money, he tells the story of what God has spoken to him. And there was a man sitting in the pews who the Lord had spoke to in advance. Paul gets knocked off his horse. He's on the road to Damascus, right? Go to kill Christians, right? To persecute the church. A voice comes from the sky, says to him, Paul, why are you persecuting me? Right? The Lord Jesus speaks to him and he's blinded. And he says, hey, go into Damascus and go to Straight Street. He gave him the address. Well, guess what? Imagine you're the man on Straight Street. He's got a name. I forget it right now. Imagine Jesus speaking to you. You're just, maybe you're tending your garden. And Jesus says to you, hey, there's a man coming. You know that guy Saul of Tarsus? Yeah. He's coming to you. And you're like, what? I've heard of that guy. He's the guy that's killing us. He's the guy that's persecuting the church. That guy, that violent guy, he's coming here? Yeah, he's coming here. Okay. He's blinded. You're going to touch his eyes. And the scales are going to fall off. That's the kingdom. That's Jesus. That's what he does. He goes before us. He is a shepherd, and we recognize his voice. And so what's really amazing to me is this is speaking directly into my current immediate circumstances right now. Move forward with me. I don't communicate in incomplete equations. You think you have to short circuit this by essentially making God, mammon your God. Nope. No. It's not how it works. You follow me. And so that's what I needed to hear today. I don't know what you needed to hear from all this, but that's what I needed to hear today. And it's just so wonderful, right? And I prayed for this. I said, hey, show me the way. Show me the right thing to do on Right Side Up with Steve Stites today. And this is what he showed me. And so if nothing else, this is for me and not for you. There's 102 people here, and I thank you for being here. But folks, if you want to learn more about this and understand this, we have there's 37 episodes with Steve Staggs. Those are in a playlist, but there's now 72 episodes. And so 38 on is obviously without Steve because he passed away after 37. But what I'm just so thankful for is that I went to this meetup. Carter brought his friend. I shook his hand. The Lord said, listen to him. And I don't know anyone except Steve Staggs in my life who would go to such lengths to give of his time. And why? When I asked him, I said, what has the Lord called you to? And he says, Jesus called me to the men of the transfer. And now that I look back at that, I go, wow, he was just fulfilling the purpose that he was made and created for. And he saw in me something, and I was interested in listening. And what did he say to me? Hey, Matt, don't take my word for it. Ask him yourself. And so what I love about this whole thing is this is the purity of this for me. Is so much of my life in the kind of Christendom world of the church and everything. It's been listen to this pastor, listen to this sermon, listen to this guy, listen to this thing on Instagram, listen to this thing about Bill Gates. No, listen to Jesus. He stands alone. And Steve said he saw a vision of a whirlwind. So imagine like a tornado or something, right? And he literally saw Jesus standing in the middle of it. And it was peaceful in the middle. And he said, Jesus called me in to stand with him in the whirlwind. And that's a picture of this whole thing. This world is a whirlwind around us, right? In a system that's controlled by Satan. And there's one who stands alone. And he is a person and he's alive and he speaks. And he says, come, stand with me. And he says, I've seated you in the heavenlies with me. Steve did an incredible talk, and maybe we'll cover this next time, about the high places. You've already been seated with him. So when you ask him, how do you see this? You're seeing it from his perspective. He's got the view, the correct view of it. Trust me, you and I don't. Until we ask him. And of course, there's model after model after model of this. Satan comes out of the wilderness. He knows Jesus is hungry. He's like, hey, turn these stones into bread. Hey, what did he want him to do? He wanted to come up underneath his authority. He was wanting to give him the power, wanted to give him the authority over all these things. And he knew he already owned it all. But he says, man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God. And that was the practice while he was here. And so when you understand that, it will absolutely blow your mind. And it has blown mine. And so I just thank you for listening to this. This isn't for everyone, right? Because people, so many things that, people would reject and all this. This is not a theology, folks. This is not a religion. This is not no. This is just the way it works and how it functions, right? We have put all of these things around it, right? We built up these belief systems around it. At the end of the day, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. And you will come to recognize it whether you know it now or not. You recognize who he is. And what did he say to the thief on the cross? Today, you will be with me in paradise. So while we're still here, breathing and kicking, I want to say thank you, Carter, for bringing Steve. Thank you, Steve, for following Jesus. Thank you, Jesus, that you're alive and you speak. And I'm going to move forward with you because that's actually where all of the action happens. And so the transfer isn't just about, it's about kingdom economics and you need to be, you need to integrate Jesus into your business. No. You need to integrate Jesus into like your every thought because when you go your own way, guess what? There's a way that seems right to a man and it ultimately leads to death. And it's amazing. He's like, well, what's the whole purpose of this? Well, I know the guy who knows it all. Why don't you ask him yourself? Don't ask me. Don't trust me. Don't trust Steve. Trust some pastor. No, go ask him yourself. And it's not just by reading your Bible because he's alive. But that's the thing that is actually part of the lie of kind of the Western church. And there are some places that you get, closer and closer to this where they're like, hey, but at the end of the day, he is, he was, and he is to come. And the way in which we do this in the practical is really never spoken to. And when Steve came into my life and showed me, hey, this is how it works in the present, we talk to a living Jesus and we're changed. And in that process, he gives us faith. You don't muster it, he gives it to you. How? What is prayer? I talk to him. Huh. There's nothing new, folks. And I think most mature believers say, yeah, that's how it works, man. He walks with me and he talks with me. It's interesting. Anyway, I hope it's encouraging to you. I think what is amazing about it is this is the most practical it's become for me. So over this 72 episodes and all of this stuff, it's been extremely amazing because what's really the product of all this? It's peace that transcends all understanding. And you're like, most of the people I meet are striving. Most of the people I meet are putting in and trying to muscle this effort. But what do we really want? And I think we see this a lot of times, with the alpha male, right? Out there muscling it. You need to know the 42 rules of power, right? You need to know these things. Well, yeah, if you want to extract, if you want to participate in that system. But I'm going to tell you right now, the whole story, the whole shoot match and all of this, I know who wins in the end. The one who's strategic, right? I know the one who all things are created for and by him. And so you can reject that. That's fine. That's your choice. And that's actually the beauty of it. Question is, are you ultimately interested? Not do you believe in this doctrine? No, come to him. And that's why it's all throughout our culture vernacular. This is the come to Jesus meeting. What does it mean to come to him? You come to a living person who actually speaks and he has all authority. And that's where the transformation is. And that's what the transfer is. It's the transfer of the man. It's the transfer of you. And it's a transfer of all that he has. And we see this, right? Russell Brand is a great example of this. A man being transferred transfers all that the man has. But it's a journey. It's a daily journey. We hold these thoughts captive. But the encouragement from Steve is it becomes like breathing. But I think a lot of us think that it's about these things that we attain or that we gain. Well, it's this thing and it's going to be this thing. No, follow me. Follow me. And I will set before you the things that you have not seen. And that's incredible. Trust me, and I will show you what is about to happen. I'm going to set these things right before you. You're going to be able to discern between what's real and what's not. I'm going to give you this wisdom. That's why Solomon talked so much about this idea of gaining wisdom. It's like, what is the wisdom? Well, it's from the Lord. Where does it come from? By talking to him. Well, I want purpose in my life. I want peace in my life and all these things. And I've stuffed everything I possibly can into this. It's like, well, how's that look? How's that turned out? I think we're coming into a new age. I see this very clearly. All these scientific people and all the people that are drilling into the quantum and all the stuff that's happening with UAPs and all these things, we only see in a very narrow band. It says we see very dimly, but there's going to be a time when we see clearly. And when you see this, all of this will make sense. And you trust me, in the next 10 years, we're going to have people freaking out because their belief system that was built by a group of people in a culture in a church is going to be rocked to the core. And what will be standing alone? Jesus will stand alone. A living, speaking Jesus will stand alone. Folks, what an exciting time we are living in. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Thanks for joining the Pulse today. If you want more information here, go to my channel, look at the playlist. You'll see all of this stuff in podcast form. In some of these, like if you go to last week's episode, which was 71, there's a link there to our Telegram chat. There's some writings of Steve Staggs, one called the 1960s White Paper, which is a perfect kind of primer on this. Amazing, amazing paper that you can read. But I want to make sure it's very, very clear. I'm not asking you to follow me, follow Steve, follow any of this. No. This is follow Jesus, period. And it's not any more complicated than being interested. Question is, are you? Have a great weekend and do not mess with Texas. Take care, everybody.